Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Today's video is going to be my April wrap up, so let's jump in. So yeah, another late wrap up, and Gwen pointed it out last time how I would just, upload my wrap ups late, and yeah, that's me. It's probably gonna continue being late for a while. Because, yeah, that's just how we do things here. I know, it's pretty ridiculous. So I read a total of 12 books for the month of April, so not too bad, not too bad. So the book that I started the month off with is actually a book that I've been trying to read since January. It won Book of the Year for Book of the Month, and that is The Vanishing Half by Brit Bennett. Now, going into this, being that it was the Book of the Year for Book of the Month, I had high hopes because for 2019, Daisy Jones and the Six won the Book of the Year, and that's the book that I had voted for to win. I loved that book so hard, and so I had high hopes for this one. But although it was a very good book and I loved it, it wasn't a 5-star read for me as Daisy Jones and the Six was. I ended up giving this one 4 stars, so it was still a great book, but this is just not the book that I typically pick up. Although there have been many books like Valentine, that's not a book that I would generally pick up. But something about that book called out to me and it was a 5-star read. This is not my usual read, but it was still a deep, engrossing book. This book is about twins. They are inseparable when they're young, but as they go growing, they start wanting different things. They ultimately end up leaving this town, this small town that they're raised in, and only one of them comes back with a daughter of her own, which is sort of looked down upon because her daughter ends up being very, very, very dark. And in this community, although they're all black, they are very light-skinned, and so they look down upon somebody that has darker skin, which her daughter does. The other sister never comes back and decides to live a very white life because she can be passed as a white person and marries a white man and lives a totally different life than her sister. But of course, their lives intertwine at some point throughout the book. It was very powerful. It was very gripping. I did cry. It was just a very sad story, especially following along one of the twins and seeing her sadness at not being able to see her sister because they sort of lost touch throughout the years. Again, very powerful, 4 stars. Next, I listened to my first audiobook from NetGalley. They started doing audiobooks a couple months back, or maybe at the beginning of the year. I can't really remember. And I requested The Drowning Kind by Jennifer McMahon, and it was so good. Jennifer McMahon really knows how to write sisterly relationships or just relationships in general. I've read The Winter People from her, and I have also read The Invited. I loved both of those books, and The Drowning Kind is no exception. The story is actually told from 2 different timelines. We're following a husband and wife back in the day, and they're trying to get pregnant, but they just can't seem to get pregnant, and they hear about this hotel that has like this spring behind it or something that has powers, and so they travel to this hotel and they travel to these springs, and of course she has something in mind as to if it's true that this spring actually grants wishes and miracles. She has something in mind. And then in more current times, we're following this sister and this house and this pool in the backyard. We're just really reading about these 2 timelines and how this pool or body of water has affected both of these families. It was super atmospheric, which is another Jennifer McMahon trait. Her books are so atmospheric, and I keep hearing people talking about how this really makes you afraid of the water because there's a lot of water talk, and how it's so scary in that sense. It really didn't scare me as far as the body of water goes, and not being able to see what's behind the water and it being so eerie. Because I just love the water so much, but I can see how it can be pretty creepy. If you have a fear of water or like depth and stuff in the water, I highly recommend this one because it will freak you out. And that's the whole point of reading horror books, right? Is to get that little creepy feeling. This was a phenomenal book. I ended up giving it 5 stars. Next book I read is In the Hills Above the Gristmill by Calvin Ellis. Calvin Ellis is somebody that I talk to constantly on Instagram. I mean, not constantly, but and I really didn't even know that he was an author until I don't even know how I found out. And I'm like, why didn't you tell me you had a book? And I bought it right away. This was such a good book. So here we are following Paisley, and she's gone through some traumatic experiences in her life, which really, I'm holding the book backwards. She has gone through some traumatic experience as her mother dying, which gives her anxiety. And she decides to turn her anxiety for the positive, and she becomes like a paranormal investigator. She has a YouTube channel, and I loved that aspect of it with the YouTube and her being like, and her vlogging and stuff. I thought that was pretty cool. But anyways, she has this YouTube channel. She has a nice little following, and she just goes around doing paranormal investigations. She gets contacted by this preacher, Hollis Grimm, and he invites her to come to this small Appalachian town, mining town, to do an investigation because they believe, or some of the people in this town believe, that God has sent this horrific creature as punishment. And so she decides to take on the job, and she ends up going to this town, and she starts doing her investigating. And Paisley as a character was so bomb. She decides to visit with some of the people and get to know them. Creepy things are happening with this monster and people that are going missing and finding dead bodies. And so she's just trying to find out what's going on at the same time as meeting another woman that's also like an internet celebrity, more or less, and she gets together with her, and together they're just trying to find out what's going on. Like, is this monster real, or is somebody killing these people? It was so fun following Paisley around as she's trying to uncover these secrets and stuff. There are a couple of like really creepy foresty kind of scenes in there, but I really liked Paisley's like determination, and I really liked her eagerness to find out what is happening. My only complaint about this is that it read a little bit young. I did listen to this as an audiobook. Calvin was so kind to send me the audiobook for free, but I did purchase the book, and I don't know if it read young because of the narrator. Now, first off, the narrator did such a great job. I really enjoyed listening to her, and she brought the story to life. But at the same time, I don't know if she just maybe gave this a very like young infliction when she read Paisley. I'm wanting to wait a little bit and then go back in and read and reread it to see if it was just the audiobook or if the book just reads young from Paisley's point of view. I can't remember how old Paisley is in the book, but I don't think she is that young. But this book reads really good. There are a lot of Stephen King references, which you could really tell that Calvin loves Stephen King. Really good book. I ended up giving this one 4 stars. Also, if you're interested in reading this book, the author did send me a message, and he let me know that he is going to be putting the book up for free, the ebook up for free, starting either on the 18th or 19th. So by the time you guys are seeing this, either today or tomorrow, definitely check it out if you want to read something very atmospheric and fun, and with like social media tied into it and stuff. I would definitely check it out. I'm gonna leave it linked down below, so if you want to read it, head on over there and get you an e-copy, because it was definitely a lot of fun. Then I picked up Then She Was Gone by Lisa Jewell. I just love me a good Lisa Jewell book. Here we are following Ellie Mack and her disappearance. We're following this household, this mom, and it's 3 children, and Ellie is the oldest of them. You really like Ellie. She's a very likable character, but one day she goes missing and they can never find her. There's no trace of her, nothing, but her mother cannot give her up. Duh, as a mother does. She is searching for her, trying to find out the outcome of her daughter's disappearance, which nothing ever came from. 10 years later, some weird events start happening in her life where things just start lining up for her to find out what really happened to her daughter. Let me tell y'all, there was one scene here where I was like, wow, I think that this is one of Lisa Jewell's darkest books. Her books usually are very dark in tone and have very dark subject matters, but I think this is the first one that I read where we encounter a very gross and descriptive scene that I just absolutely love. When you're finding out about what really happened to Ellie Mack, I mean, she really brings it, and I loved it. I loved how dark this book got, which kind of like negates the little flowers in front of the book, even though it's still like a gray tone. But I absolutely love this. I loved the reveal of what happened with Ellie. I think it's one of my favorites from Lisa Jewell. This is the 4th book that I read from her, and they have all been 5 stars, including this one. I love each and every one of them, and I will continue reading Lisa Jewell forever and ever because she has some of the best thrillers out in the market, in my opinion. 5 stars. Next was a Nightworms book party, and that was Howls from Hell. Then I jumped into a Nightworms book party with Howls from Hell, a horror anthology, which has a foreword by Grady Hendrix. This was fantastic. This is an anthology that holds 16 stories, and I feel like the next story was better than the last. Like, I kept falling and falling and falling in love with the next and the next and the next, which is sort of like a rare thing, even though the past 2 or 3 collections that I have read, I keep saying the same thing. There were 2 standout stories for me. One being Suspended in Light. I absolutely loved that one, and it was like kind of dark and trippy, and I felt like, I wrote it in my review, how I felt like I was losing my mind right alongside the main character. And the second story that I love was Manufactured God, and this was like a horror Indiana Jones kind of novel, because we are following this group of people, and they're going on an expedition to Earth. Something catastrophic has happened, and I believe we either live on the moon or somewhere else, and they send out expeditions to check on to see how everything is going on. If they see anything unusual from where they live, they'll send somebody down to like check out the area. And it just follows this group that is sent down to where, I believe it's like the pyramids, or I can't remember where exactly they are, but when they go in there, stuff starts happening, and it was just so action-packed. I really loved it, but each story in here is amazing. I ended up giving this one 4 stars. Then I decided to pick up One by One by Ruth Ware. This was a book that I started in December or January at some point. I wanted to read this in the winter time because it had like these winter vibes, this mountain with this avalanche kind of like feel to it. So I wanted to read it in the winter, and I tried. I think I got 3 pages in, and I just could not, you think 3 pages in, I just could not get a hold of the characters. Here we are following a company that's called Snoop, and they are a music streaming service, but it's not like Spotify or anything. It's more interactive, where people can have followers and can see what music they're listening to, like celebrities or your friends and family. So they all decide, the company decides to take their employees out to a skiing resort and just have a good time there. At the same time, talk business and stuff, but have fun. They go out one day, they go skiing, but one of them does not return. One of the founders of the company does not return. And tragedy happens after that. There's like a big avalanche that happens, and they're all snowed in. And so you're trying to find out what happened to this person, and they're trying to unravel the mystery, all while being stranded on this resort with no electricity or power because of the avalanche that's going on and the weather. They're like being snowed in and stuff. There's like a snowstorm. So they're all locked in this resort, and it was just a fun time. I'm glad that I decided to pick it back up and that I didn't DNF it completely. Although it's not my favorite Ruth Ware, it's not my least favorite either. I ended up giving this one 3 stars. Then I decided to pick up a nonfiction book. I know, weird. I never read nonfiction, and I tried to read true crime a lot. This is sort of true crime-ish, but not really. I read The Real Lolita by Sarah Weinman. This is the story about Sally Horner. I don't know if you guys know, but back, I forgot when, in 1948, this girl Sally Horner goes missing. She is approached by an FBI agent and tells her, he actually catches her in a way stealing something. She has never stolen anything before. She's with a group of friends, and they end up stealing like this little trinket, and she's approached by an FBI agent and basically tells her this story, how he's an FBI agent, but he's not going to get her in trouble, not to worry. But he later ends up contacting her or coming across her and ends up kidnapping her, telling her that he needs to come with her, ends up telling her some lie and ends up convincing her. She was 11 years old at the time. There was a big investigation, a big search for her. Nobody can find her. And he just kept going and evading and evading. This was in the 1948, so you really didn't have any kind of tracking or anything. They were just trying to locate her and locate him. They knew she was still alive. Anyways, long story short, she ends up being rescued. She ends up fleeing, and they end up catching her kidnapper, which is Frank LaSalle. Now, Sarah has always seen a connection between Sally Horner's story and the novel Lolita by Vladimir Nabokov. Did I say that right? I think I did. Vladimir never states whether Lolita was influenced by Sally Horner's story, but Sarah saw so many connections, so she brought it upon herself to investigate, and investigate she did. She outlines all the similarities between the novel and the real story. She dives deep. She tries to see and tries to recover notes or books from the author herself so that she can verify once and for all, see if Lolita was indeed inspired by Sally Horner's story. I do believe that the story was inspired by the real story. It's just more fictionalized. Obviously, in Lolita we have Humbert something, I forget his name. There's a lot of the stops that Sally Horner and Frank LaSalle made are in the book Lolita, and he never came out and said that it was inspired. So yeah, it was just a very informative and interesting read. I ended up giving this one 4 stars. Then I jumped into the audiobook for The Deep by Rivers Solomon. I ended up giving this one 3 stars. This just follows the story of this group of people called the Wajinru and how they came upon to live in the deep waters. Basically, there was African slaves that were pregnant that were thrown overboard, and they somehow learned how to live underwater. Only one of their members, which is the historian, I believe is called, yes, the historian of the group, can remember their past. They have all forgotten it because it was so traumatic that only the historian remembers. And it's just a story of how this historian comes across their history and what it does to them as a person and as a group. It was a fun read. It's just, again, not my type of read, but it was really short and it was enjoyable for the most part. I found myself bored a little bit, but the writing was really, really good. Anyways, again, I ended up giving it 3 stars. I read Betty in the month of April, and it was everything that I hoped it would be and more. I cried so hard with this book. I was so mesmerized by this book. It was so whimsical. It was so dark. It was so sad. It was so good. This is a story of Betty, which is actually the author's mother. She was actually the 6th child in a bunch of 8, and it's just their story and her coming of age story. She is actually the child of a white mother with a Cherokee father. So out of all 8 of them, she is the only one that comes out looking more like her dad. She has the dark skin tone, the dark hair, while her brothers and sisters are all real white and blonde. So she is bullied a lot. She is treated very poorly because of her skin color. She's taunted, and even within her own family, her own brothers and sisters, and sometimes even her mother, they treat her really, really bad. It was so sad to read at times. It was sad really to dig into the family and what the brothers and sisters were going through behind closed doors, what her mom went through behind closed doors, which would be Tiffany McDaniel's grandmother. And it was just a very heartfelt story. If you're going to read this, know that it is heart-wrenching. Some of the treatments that Betty goes through is some of the worst, but I think what made this book very tolerable, not that it was intolerable, but it was just really sad. What really drew hope from the story was Betty's father. He was very whimsical, full of tales and traditions that he taught Betty. He really, I think that out of all of them, I hate to say that there was a favorite, but I feel like Betty was her father's favorite. They had such a strong connection, and I don't know if it was because of how he looks so much like her as opposed to the other kids. There's dark lies and secrets that lie between the family that Betty sort of takes upon her shoulders, because somehow she finds out all the dark secrets and lies that run in her family and in her household, and she carries all of this on her shoulders on top of being verbally and emotionally abused. So it was a very heavy read, but at the end it was just very hopeful and very endearing and warm. Again, 5 stars. There was times where I didn't want to pick the book back up because it was just so taxing on my emotions, especially reading from poor Betty's point of view and all the hurt that she went through. It was taxing at times, and it took me all month long to read it because of that, because I kept like hesitating to go down to it because I know it was going to be such a heart-wrenching read, but I didn't think it was going to be that heart-wrenching. I mean, what Betty went through was crazy. Next, I picked up the Buddy Reads to Die For choice for April, which was Untamed Shores by Silvia Moreno Garcia. This was okay. I liked Mexican Gothic much more. It was just a different kind of story. Here we are just following Viridiana, and she ends up landing a job for these American tourists that come to stay at her town, village, city, and she ends up working for them as the man's assistant. Now this man is there to write a book, and he just needed an assistant. I don't know why, but I think there's somewhere where it's like a Spanish speaking community, and she ends up being his assistant and translating things for him and like typing things and things like that for his book. And he's there with his wife and his wife's brother. One of them turns out dead one day, and she ends up lying to the police for the other two. Because she's become friends with them and really likes them and has spent time with them. But it's just really trying to come down to the truth of how this man has died. If he was murdered, if he died of natural causes, and there's a whole investigation going on. It was a fun read. It wasn't my favorite. It was pretty forgettable as I'm sitting here talking about it. I can't remember the details of it, and the only reason why I'm telling you what the book was about was because I read the synopsis before talking about it. And it was a struggle because, again, I can't remember the details of it. I ended up giving this one 3 stars. It was fun while I was reading it, but again, super forgettable. Let's talk about a book that I DNF'd for the month of May. I know, yes, I had a DNF. That is We Ride Upon Sticks by Quan Berry. This was actually the April pick for our Stacks of Strange book club, and it was just a DNF for me. I wasn't interested. I didn't care about the storyline. I didn't care. I mean, the witches part of it really called out to me, but even then, I think I got like 100 pages in, and I just couldn't keep going. Again, I didn't care about the characters. I didn't care about the plot line. I didn't care about anything about this book. I honestly can't tell you what this book is about other than there's a sports team and there's witches. Other than that, I don't know. It was a DNF, and I don't want to talk about it anymore. It's very rare for me to DNF books, but this year I have just been DNFing left and right. Let's talk about a reread that I did in the month of April. I know I reread a book. The Shadow and Bone Netflix series came out in the month of April, and I was really hoping to read all the books in the Grishaverse, but I did not make it. But I did get to read Shadow and Bone. Initially, I was just planning on rereading Shadow and Bone and then watching the show, but I forgot who I was talking to. It might have been Carol, or somebody said that there was characters from Six of Crows in the Netflix series. So at that point, I decided that I want to read all the books. All the books in the Grishaverse I want to read before I watch the show. 5 stars still. I love anything Leigh Bardugo writes, and I honestly cannot wait to get to King of Scars, because King of Scars, the duology, is... King of Scars I never read, and we just got... the second book in the duology, Rule of the Wolves, or Rule of something about wolves. But I'm very excited to be getting to that part of the story because I haven't read those yet. Revisiting with Alina and Mal was just so fun. I was able to tab out the book, which I originally didn't tab out anything when I originally read it because I wasn't into like marking stuff on books and stuff. but I'm so glad that I got to reread it because I did mark out some of my favorite parts, and I actually color coded my tabs, which I usually don't do. I just tab like favorite parts in the book or like quotes, but this time I color coordinated them to where like when it was Alina and the Darkling, when it was Alina and Mal's relationship, when it was just her as a badass. I just love everything about this world, and I'm super eager to continue on rereading the rest of the series, which I have not done yet. But yes, 5 stars once again. And the last and final book that I read for the month was Throne of Glass by Sarah J Maas. I don't know what's going on. I'm just reading all these Sarah J Maas books when I never thought I would read them. I started off with the ACOTAR series. I still have 2 books left from that series that I haven't finished, and I actually wanted to finish that series before jumping into this, but I signed up for a very fun buddy read with my friend Tali and my friend Joyce over on Instagram. We are reading the whole series together. Joyce loves this series and we decided to join her, so it's been fun. We're following Selena, and she has an opportunity to win her freedom. But things are not just as clear or just as easy. She has to agree to compete to become the king's champion. Now, she is a badass assassin. She's like not phased. She knows that she's going to win this. She has to go against 23 other thieves and killers to become the king's champion. To after becoming the king's champion and doing all his bidding and whatever he wants her to do, I guess kill people or whatever, then she gets her freedom. So it's just following that storyline of her competing with these other contestants, and at some point throughout the book, as the competitions are coming closer and closer, some of the contestants or other competitors start dropping dead after mysterious events. So this follows just that timeline. We're following her as she's trying to win, and also as she's trying to survive, because she feels like she's going to be the next one that is going to be found murdered. So it was just so fun following Selena around. She's so badass. I really liked it. I ended up giving this one 5 stars. So that's it, you guys. Those are all the books that I read for the month of April. If I had to pick a favorite out of all these books, I would probably have to give it to Shadow and Bone. But because Shadow and Bone was a reread, I'm going to pick another one, and it would probably be in between Betty and Throne of Glass. And I don't think I could choose one because Betty was such a heavy read. It was a favorite, but it was such a heavy read that I think about it and my heart hurts. And Throne of Glass, I mean, they're just so different. And my least favorite book would probably, I hate to say this, but would probably have to be The Deep. I just wasn't very interested in the story, and the only reason why I finished it is, number 1, because it was written really well, and number 2, because it was such a short read. I think the audiobook is like 3 or 4 hours long, and I think I was able to listen to it in 2 hours. If it would have been a longer book, I probably would have DNF'd it, but it wasn't bad. Like, I know I'm in the minority when I talk about The Deep, because anybody who reads it loves it and ends up giving it 5 stars and praises it, but it just didn't do much for me. Let me know in the comment section down below what books you read for the month of April. What was your favorite and your least favorite book, as always. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you guys in my next one. Bye!